Students may think of 9/11 as a tragic event and a terrorist attack that happened many years ago. But have they thought about what it would be like to be in the time that it happened, and what it was also like for the people who had to experience such a horrific event? To think about the people who lost their lives that day, people who had no clue that day would be different from any other day. Everyone experienced that day differently, by being there when it happened, or finding it on the news, radio, or TV. Learning of the attack when a coworker or parent ran into the room and turned on the TV. Even though it was such a heartbreaking day, people still stuck together and helped each other because they still had hope. Because they had hope, the hope enabled some to make it out of the burning, crumbling towers, while emergency workers rushed in to see what they could do at the scene.
Today, Liberty will gather to remember 9/11, to honor those who lost their lives and to recognize the first responders who were there to help. We encourage you to join us in our remembrance ceremony, standing together in reflection and unity. Liberty ensures that these memories continue through stories shared by our guests from previous years. As a special guest, Joseph Stellato, Liberty's high school class of 1989, will recount his time volunteering at Ground Zero after the 9/11 attacks.
Good morning. Thank you all for attending the Patriot Day 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony. Would you all please rise and remain standing for the posting of the colors, the national anthem, taps, and Amazing Grace.
Honor guard, forward, walk.
Once again, good morning, and I really appreciate you all coming out and helping us remember 24 years ago, a day that was very traumatic, tragic for all those who witnessed it and were around to experience that day and the weeks and months following. That day was much like today in terms of the weather. I've heard it referred to as a bluebird sky because it's cloudless, clear, crisp, and blue. And it does remind you each September when the weather is like that of that day. 24 years ago, foreign terrorists hijacked 4 passenger airlines and flew them into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers, the U.S. Pentagon, and into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, killing nearly 3,000 innocent civilians and thrusting America into a decades-long war on global terror. Every year since that tragic event, on September 11th, or the day closest to that, Liberty High School has taken time to remember that day and the innocent lives lost in those attacks. It seems every generation experiences at least one event so impactful that it's seared in their memories. The generations of the 1940s remember Pearl Harbor. Those of the 1960s remember the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Those from the 80s remember the Challenger disaster, the shuttle that exploded in air. And the generations of this century, century's turn, will always remember September 11th. Those of us who experienced that day don't have a choice about whether or not we remember. The memories will be there for the rest of our lives. The choice we do have is whether or not to acknowledge those memories, whether or not we memorialize them. For each generation that comes after, those who have no memory of that day, your generation, the choice is much more difficult and in many ways more important. Your generation's choice, whether or not to commemorate 9/11 for years to come, decides whether or not the memories of my generation endure or simply fade away. Today, our guest speaker is Joe Stellato. He's a proud graduate of 1989 Liberty High School graduation class, where he excelled in as a three-sport athlete, football, basketball, and baseball. His dedication and talent on the field earned him a football scholarship to East Stroudsburg University. After college, Joe returned to Bethlehem School District, where he began a long and impactful career in education and coaching. He has taught in the district for 28 years and is entering his 26th year as a coach. In 2000, he became the head coach of the Freedom High School boys basketball team, a role in which he continues to lead and mentor student athletes. Today, Joe joins us not just as a respected educator and coach, but as someone with a personal story to share. He's here to speak about his experience on September 11, 2001, a day that shaped our nation and touched countless lives, including his own. Please join me in welcoming Coach Stellato.
So, thank you for the invite. It's kind of funny, it seems like I've been over here a couple times already, and I have not even given this talk to a lot of freedom classes. So this isn't about liberty or freedom. This is not about politics. This is about us remembering 9/11 and for you guys learning about 9/11 and what happened on that day. So my personal story goes like this. I was at East Stroudsburg University in the 89 through 96. Yeah, that's a lot of years, but I was there through 96, played football, came back to Bethlehem, where I was raised and born and sat in those seats right there, probably the same exact ones, and started teaching. And I taught at Miller Heights Elementary School. And in 2001, on that day, I was at Miller Heights, and it was 8:45 a.m., so I was still in the teacher's lounge, and watching Sports Center, of course, and they interrupted Sports Center to tell the news of a plane accidentally crashing into the tower, at the time thinking it was an accident. So right away, just like I think many of us on the outside of the teachers that remember that day, remember exactly how they felt, what they were doing, what they were thinking. And what instantly came to my mind was anybody that I knew working there that I needed to check on, you know, because it has to hit home first, you know, and I thought, no, nobody I know works there. I thought of one guy, and I did reach out to that person later that morning and found out, no, he was not working there anymore. So I moved on with my day, just like everybody else, and was glued to the TV. Got home from school, watched even more, okay? With a heavy heart for those families that did lose people. Over 3,000 people died on 9/11 at the towers. So it was a difficult night to sit there in front of the TV watching that. But again, not having that personal impact, I was watching it from afar. And that night I went to bed, and about 2 a.m., the telephone rings, and it was still back then. We had cell phones, but they were not that popular. We weren't on them all the time. And it was the line at home rang, and next to my bed, I answered it. And a person on the other line was screaming, "He's gone, he's gone." And I'm like, and I couldn't even understand. I said, "You must have the wrong number. I don't know, who is this?" And he just kept screaming and yelling, "I can't believe it." And I said, "Who is this?" And he yelled, "It's Bogus." Now, Bogus was my roommate at college. So Todd and I, with two other guys, were roommates. And I said, "Bogus, what's up?" Boggs, we called him Boggs. "Boggs, what's up?" And he could barely get it out, and he said, "Marty's gone." I said, Marty was another roommate of ours. We had three other people besides myself, so it was four of us living in a house. And he said, "Marty's gone." I said, "What do you mean Marty's gone?" And he said, "Marty was in the tower, and they can't find him." So from that day on, my life changed, because Marty was one of my best friends. And I got off the phone, kind of obviously at 2 a.m, just kind of gathering my thoughts, struggled the rest of the morning, called him back about 4:30 a.m. I said, "Are you sleeping?" He said, "No, of course not." I said, "Did you get a hold of the family?" He said, "Yeah." He spoke to Marty's wife, who also went to college with us and basically lived with us through those years. So we were very close with her as well, and he reached out to her, and that's who ended up telling him. And he said he's going there tomorrow morning, and that was on a Wednesday morning. And I said, "I will be going as well." So got up 6 a.m, didn't sleep, or basically was already up. Called off sick, went, picked up Boggs. He was still living in East Stroudsburg. Picked him up, and we drove to New Jersey where Marty lived. We called our other roommate. He met us there. So the three of us were at Marty's house with Marty's wife, Marty's parents, Marty's brother and sister, and some of the cousins. We're all at Marty's wife's house. And we got there, and obviously it was a devastating morning. But I noticed that nobody was really taking charge. And just kind of the person that I am, I just kind of like started taking some leadership role in that situation and said, okay. And I started being positive because, again, that's who I am as a person. And I said, listen, we don't know Marty's dead. We don't know yet. You know, there's people at the hospitals that are unconscious, and maybe Marty's there as a John Doe. So we kind of rallied the troops, and we went to the different hospitals. We kind of took groups. Okay, you're going to this hospital. And we did the best we can looking for Marty that day. And we met back at the house for late afternoon, early evening, ate something for dinner, and started telling Marty stories about what kind of guy he was and how funny stories that we had. One particular is we always went with him to get his back waxed. He had a lot of hair on his back, so we always, as football guys, we always went with him to go because they would peel that thing off. The lady would actually let us peel it off. It was hilarious. But anyway, so we were giving Marty stories, and we also talked about his resilience and how he was a walk-on on the football team, and how he made it. Walk-ons don't make it too often. You know, it's usually scholarship players, and he made it and became a starter with us. So he made it. He was very resilient. And we said, if anybody can make it, Marty can make this. He made it. And the brother was just really not positive with us. And at some point in the evening, I put my arm around him. I said, Marty's going to make it, man. He's going to be okay. We're going to find him. And he said, no, we're not. And I said, what do you mean? He said, come outside with me. And I kind of looked at my other two roommates, and I kind of gave him this look and said, come out with me. And the three of us went outside with his brother, and his brother told us the story. Marty was in the 104th floor. The plane hit between 93 and 99, and Marty called his brother, who worked in New York City, across the street and a couple buildings down. And he said, Marty called after the first plane hit the building, and he said, hey, what's going on? And the brother knew because he was watching the news. He said, a plane accidentally hit the tower. Get down, come over to my office. Marty called 20 minutes later, screaming on the phone. He couldn't get down. He couldn't get down. And he was screaming on the phone, and he was back up even beyond the 104th. I think the brother said he was on the 106th. I think it only went up to 108, but he was on the 106th floor because he kept trying to go up instead of down. He couldn't go down, and all the smoke and fire was coming up. And I want you guys to go and watch a documentary on it. I cannot watch it yet. I still can't watch it. I still can't go to New York to the museum. I can't. I just can't function. So the smoke was coming up, and Marty's saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I don't know what to do. I'm going to jump. And the brothers are saying, no, don't jump. We're going to get you. They're going to get you. They're going to get you. And that's the last thing Marty said, was tell my wife I love her, tell mom and dad I love them, and tell my friends I love them. And that was the last thing Marty said, and that's the last thing we heard of Marty. So the brother told us that outside. Never told the family. He couldn't do it. He wanted to give them hope, and he just couldn't do it. And I said, as we sat out there and cried our eyes out, we said, we gotta go tell the family. And again, me being me, we walked in, and I said, guys, we gotta talk. And we went through that story with them, and the rest of the night was an absolute nightmare. So the next morning we get up. Obviously we didn't sleep. We got up, and me and my other two roommates were standing around not knowing what to do. So my one roommate went his direction, and I grabbed Bogus, and him and I was driving back to East Stroudsburg. And we did have phones, because I remember we were calling our buddies on the football team, telling them that Marty is gone. And the one guy we called was a guy named Stan, who was a coach at East Stroudsburg. He played for the Vikings, and he was like an assistant coach, and he just took a liking to us, my crew, you know. And we called him, and we said, Stan, Marty's gone. He said, oh my God. He said, I am on ground zero right now. I'm with the union, and I'm working to clear out the debris. And he said, come to ground zero. I said, Joe Stellato from Bethlehem is not getting into ground zero. But I looked at my buddy and I said, we're going to ground zero. And he said, there's no way. And I said, we're going. So Stan said, go to Jersey City, go into where the ferries go, tell them you're with Union 926. And that's what we did. We walked up like we owned the place. Where were you? Union 926. Oh my goodness, come on in. They put us in a tent. They put us in some rain gear. They put a helmet on us. They put us on the ferry, and off we went to New York City. So there I am in a boat going over with my helmet on. And we got to New York City. They unloaded us, and there were some other union workers in front of us, and they led the way because we didn't know where we were going. They led the way, and we were following them. And as we're walking towards Ground Zero, now, I told my girlfriend's son last night about Ground Zero, and he didn't know what Ground Zero was. So let me tell you what Ground Zero was. Ground Zero is where the towers collapsed. That was considered Ground Zero. And can you imagine the debris that collapsed from both of those buildings? So, in my mind, we're walking up, I'm going to find Marty. No matter what, I'm finding Marty. I'm not leaving here until I find Marty. So we're walking up down the street. It was about a mile walk. We're walking down the street, and it was the most eerie thing you've ever seen, because New York City has thousands and thousands and millions of people. Nobody was around, not a soul. So we're walking in the street with not a soul around. And as we're getting closer, the buildings across from us are getting worse and worse, meaning the windows were shattered. The debris, some of the cars that were smashed, they started driving them out of the Ground Zero and putting them down the street and stacking them. So it was a war zone. It looked like a war zone. We're walking down, and on the left-hand side, and I have pictures, but we couldn't get them up today, but there was paper from all the buildings. Imagine, it was office. So all the papers kind of blew, and they blew into a playground that was fenced in. So the whole playground was covered in paper. It was just a really eerie thing. Looking over at that, thinking, what? I don't even understand. As we walked down even more, there was a piece of steel as big as you could see sliced into another building like butter. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And as we turned the corner, there's Ground Zero. Destruction as far as I can see. And we found Stan, and Stan got us organized in what we need to do. And I said to Stan, I'm finding Marty. All right, let's do it. So we were this is how it worked at Ground Zero. Here's all the debris, miles and miles of debris. We stood in a line I was next to firemen, union workers, police officers, and we stood there, and they took piece of steel out at a time because they still had people living underneath there. They had to find body parts. So we basically stood there with buckets, and one guy handed it to me, I would hand it to the next guy, and it would go all the way through the line. And this is the part that I still struggle to this day, and still had a nightmare last night about it. Body parts. So if you can imagine when people were falling and slicing pieces of body parts from their body, they had to be taken out. So in the bucket, they would yell body part. You take the bucket and you yell body part and you hand it to the next person. And I still regret looking down every single time looking for Marty. I saw fingers, I saw arms, I saw a head, and I was looking for Marty. That's not easy. So I stood there for 12 hours, and it was all wet. We were up in the puddles, and then all of a sudden they would yell, body. So that means they found a body. So a different crew would have to come in and take that body away, so we would move our line to another spot. And I stood next to a fireman and a police officer for 12 hours and never said a word. We just worked. That's what we did. And that's what Marty would have done for me, and that's what I did for him. And Stan gathered us up when it got dark, and he took us back to Jersey City where he lived, and we stayed in his apartment. And he asked, are you going back? I said, yes, I'm going back. I told you, I'm not leaving here until I find Marty. So he took us back the next day, and we went to a little gas station that night, and I bought a little camera, little pocket camera, and I put it in my pocket when I went back. And I took pictures of all 9/11. I have some amazing pictures from this little pocket camera. My roommate did the same. And we went back and we worked another 18 hours. Same thing. Body part, body part. Didn't affect me then. I looked down every time. Later on, messed with me. But at the time, I just wanted to find my buddy. The third day rolls around. We go and go back to Jersey City, take the ferry over, and now all of a sudden they're checking IDs. The president was flying in to stand on the debris and say it's time to go to war, whatever he announced, and they didn't let us in. So that day was over. The ground zero was over for me. But thank God that second day I grabbed something. I grabbed a piece of steel from that debris pile. And I hold this very tight all the time on this day to remember my buddy. So who was Marty? Marty was an amazing, hardworking man that was a great football player, but more so a better person, and just his work ethic was what was passed on to me, and that I remember him about the most. Because as a walk-on, you don't make it, you don't play. And he became a scholarship player by the end of his 4 years. So we drove home that day, and I had this the rest of my life. But that night, obviously, it changed my life. Came home, watched all the different shows and different things, and from that day on, and those of you in here that get anxiety attacks know what I'm talking about. From that day on, I get anxiety attacks now. It triggered something in me that gave that. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is maybe you don't know what ground zero is. Maybe you don't know what happened that day. But that day, this is just one story. There's thousands and thousands of stories just like mine that people lost loved ones. And the story doesn't end happy. His wife, we tried to stay in contact with, and it was just difficult. She just couldn't talk to us. And what happened was the money became an issue. The Red Cross was giving money, $1 million, to the survivors of the relatives or the people, the wives, the husbands. And then all of a sudden the parents felt that money should have been for them. The wife thought it should have been for her, and it got ugly. And she moved away, and we don't, we try to contact her every 9/11. We can't get a hold of her. I contact all my Warriors buddies, all the guys that played with me, including I texted James Franklin, who's Penn State head coach. I texted him this morning. He got back to me within 3 minutes and said, "Love you, coach. Keep doing what you're doing." And we just stick together as football guys that played all together as a family, and we just try to pass the word on for you guys to obviously not remember, you weren't born, but to learn. So I challenge you, Liberty High School, to go home tonight and watch a documentary on it, to do something, read something about it. When your teachers are talking about it today, listen. Because they have stories as well. I'm sure there's a teacher in here that was affected in some way. Listen to those stories, because that's the only way that we can keep 9/11, the memories of that going. And that's the only way that I can keep my buddy Marty memory alive. And like I said, there's people that go to the 9/11 memorial and they look up Marty. His name is Michael Marty Wortley. His name was Michael, but to us he was always Marty. He went by his middle name. But on that wall that has all the names, somebody even took one of those papers and colored it in for me and brought it home for me. Somebody gave me a flag with his name on it. And the only way we can keep his memory alive is by me doing this and coming to you guys and talking to you. So I appreciate the invite. I thank you all for listening. And I hope that tonight you do your homework of all nights. Go home and learn something about 9/11. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Stellato for coming across town and being vulnerable. and telling us his powerful story. This is something that, there isn't any students in here that were, alive at that time, but it's stories like that, and it's doing the difficult thing and looking at terrible and hard situations and learning about them, and that's how we keep people's stories alive. So again, just want to say thank you to Mr. Salato for being willing to come and do that for us. Students, I just want to say thank you to you. The amount of integrity and respect that I'm looking at this moment is really moving. So thank you for being willing to come and sit through this and hopefully learn something today and take something with you. So that's really appreciated. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Wuchter for coordinating this, one of our guidance counselors here at Liberty, and making sure that we make this, Patriot Day special every year. And I leaned over to him at one point, through the ceremony, being a first-year principal at Liberty, and I just said to him, I said, "This is fantastic." And what I meant by that is this is important. It's something that we definitely want to continue to do every year. And so, I really appreciate him for his coordination in doing this. I want to thank the Bethlehem Police Department for being a part of this today, and also for the Bethlehem Fire Department for coming and being a part of this as well, to our band and to our orchestra and our choral singers. But overall, I hope everybody enjoyed this and got something out of it. And we know it's definitely difficult to hear, but it's important.